go. This is Saturday, September 23rd, 2023, and we're talking with Jack Thompson, who was born in 1935. And we're going to try to get his ideas and what he knows about that, starting at that time. We're not going to go back to 1880s like we did before. But Jack, can you tell us, when the Second World War started, what did you and what did the other kids do during the wartime? I mean, did you play war, or did you just do other things? But tell us about your thinking of during the war.
Okay, my first memory of the war was not when the United States went, not when Germany was bombing London in the 39-40. My first one was I was in the backyard of my mom and dad's house right down the hill here, and then my grandfather's house was on this side of that, and it was the 7th of December, and my mother come out the back door of our house and told me that the Japs had just bombed Pearl Harbor. And my thought was, what's a Jap? And who do I know that's Pearl Harbor? I didn't know who Pearl Harbor was. I knew a Pinky Pearl, that was his nickname, that I went to school with, but that's as much as I knew about it. So after that, I started the first grade, and by the time 1945 come around, there were a lot of Black Diamond men, young men, in military branches of the United States. And later on, I wound up being an apprentice meat cutter in the public market in Seattle, and I worked with two Black Diamond guys that were in World War II, one in New Guinea, Don Cazzaro, and another one who was in Algeria as a tail gunner in a bomber that would fly across the Mediterranean and go into Plosti, Romania, and drop bombs. Plosti was where the oil that Germany was using. Most of their oil come from Romania and things of that nature. So a lot of the guys I worked with had some real stories to tell, and it was interesting. I had uncles in the Navy. It was just a time of turmoil. There was first military funeral I ever went to was for one of the sons of the Tireman family from Black Diamond. I had a goalie for the Black Diamond soccer team, was named Sam Zinter, lived in Morganville, and him and another guy from out by Andy's Tavern out by a lot of Black Diamond, his nickname was Winky Mustonen. They were both captured by the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge, and they spent a year or so, because it was towards the tail end of World War II with Germany, and they were prisoners of war, and then they come home. One of the interesting things about Sam Zinner, who was a German, his father saved up enough money in the middle 30s to go back to New York to a convention that was held by Nazis. That was American Germans that were supporters actually of Hitler. And it was ironic that later on Sam would be captured fighting Germans, and his father was supporting the Germans. It was a strange story.
Did your school kids during school, did they buy war bonds?
The kids
Or
didn't.
stamps?
Nothing.
Nothing?
When World War II started, there was no money in town. Nobody had any money. They owned, the company owned them. They were in company houses. All those you see on Lawson were removed from farther up towards Franklin at one time. They were removed and put on Lawson Hill. You could walk in any one of them. The front door, you walk in and you were in the front room. A door here was a bedroom. Another 15 feet, you were in the dining room, was a bedroom, and then the back was the kitchen area. There was an outhouse out there, and it was very primitive, and nobody had any money. You worked your butt off. You had, lots of them had 6, 7 kids. You bought all your food from the company store. They held it out of your paycheck. You got the company house, so the rent was there. And when it got cold, you had to buy coal that you mined from the company, so nobody had any money. You had a big decision when you were a little kid, when the train come through here, and you had a penny. Would you put it on the tracks and let the train flatten it and make it thinner and wider? Or would you go over to Mrs. Davis' confectionery and get 3 pieces of candy for that 1 penny? I've seen a few flat pennies, but I've seen a heck of a lot more candy than I have flat pennies.
Okay, let's tell me about the first car that you ever bought. The year, the make, and what did it cost?
First one I remember being in was a '39 Chev sedan, and it was, my mom and dad bought that. My mom learned how to drive in that. And if I misbehaved at home, I was threatened with, you'll have to ride with your mother if you do that again. And it was effective. I did behave out of, let's see, one summer I behaved 2 days out of 60.
Okay, let's move on and tell us about the movie house here.
The movie house?
In Black Diamond.
Well, Helen, I forget, they lived on Lake Sawyer, and they ran the movie theater. There was another family, Carl Unick. He had the movie theater, but he left Black Diamond with his wife and 2 sons of my age, and moved to Aurora Avenue and had the first drive-in theater in Seattle. The Chick and Hazel O'Connell lived on Lake Sawyer, and they had the movie hall, and we would have to pay 15 cents to go to the movie. And my mom and dad and my brother and I, so they had 2 kids, and they would have to send me, the youngest one, up, and I would buy a ticket, and then before the news come on, when the lights went down, I would sneak down and open the side door and let my brother and about 6 other kids come on in, and they'd sit there like they'd been there for 20 minutes, all wet, watching the movie.
Okay.
I had a instance when I was chosen with 2 other guys to be one of the 3 kings of Orient Tar at the Black Diamond Elementary School in the 6th grade. And we were the singers. And we rehearsed, and we knew everything very well. I was a king of Orient Tar, and I had a piece of myrrh was in the song, but actually it was something that was hot when you lit it on fire. And I never knew that it created heat. So we got the auditorium full of people, and they liked to sing, and I got it in my hand. When it come to my time to sing, I mentioned that this goddamn thing's hot. And I was moving it from hand to hand, and they set it on a desk. And when the thing was all over, my dad paddled my butt, and then there was a knock on the door, and it was the teacher apologizing, because where I'd set it, it made the shellac bubble. That's how hot it was. So then I was told, because we had a second phase of that was to be at the theater, where we had to sing for all the people in there. And I've been looking around to see what I was gonna get for Christmas, and I found an air rifle, and I was found out and told my mom and dad, that's a nice air rifle. Well, they said, you can have that if you do good at the theater. So I sang very nice at the theater, and I got the gun.
Okay. When did you get a real gun? And,
Probably when I was 7 or 8.
okay, and,
I got a gun from, I got a single shot 22, and I was instructed, don't shoot anything that your mother can't cook. That's a fact. And so if you were a rabbit, you were in trouble, or a duck. My second gun, I probably was 9 years old, and it was a single barrel, long tongue, 12 gauge shotgun with a hammer on it. And I bought it from a gentleman named Keith Tim, and you might have known of the Tims.
Yep.
Keith Tim, the father of Keith Tim, who we knew here, married a Gibson girl from Lake 12. And they lived, there used to be a little, right here on the corner where you go by the Eagles, or you go down the hill, right on that point was an abandoned building that was a shoe shop at one time. The only shoe shop guy I knew was Bill Murphy, that had like a coal shed down here alongside of the bakery, and he would, in order to fix bad shoes that I had, he would put them on the last and hit the thing a couple times with a hammer so the nails would bend over, and then he put a piece of cardboard underneath between where the nails come through, and you wouldn't see him again until the nails got long again. It was a different world, a different world.
did you guys, at your house, did you have a garden with vegetables?
Yes.
What size was it, and what did you?
My grandfather, who, the house is still there. We were talking about it earlier. It's one of the vines growing up beside the house. And then behind him there was a big garden area. He had a big backyard and then a garden area. The barn that you still see, that is his second one, because somebody was stealing gas from him and made a mistake and lit a cigarette and burnt the thing down. So he had to rebuild another one. It's barely hanging on, but it's still there. The ground, there was a garage where the house with the vines on it, this way, the shoe store was over on the other side of the road. But they had a rental house, my grandma and grandpa did. And then the existing house that's still there, and then the one that just got the new siding on it recently. I don't know if you've noticed. That's where I was.
Yeah.
The first house I remember was up on top of the hill, but it's a vacant lot now. If you look up the hill, you'll see a house, a vacant lot, and then another house. There was 3 in a row. Now the vacant lot is where we lived. My brother and I, yeah.
What would be some of the vegetables that you would grow?
Oh, they had corn, they had, I'll tell you what, one thing that was interesting, he put horseradish on a long side of a fence where he had pigs in a pen area, and he had a milk cow, because they needed the milk for the family, and the pigs didn't like the plant because it was hot. Horseradish, so they would not work underneath the fence and come over into the garden. Now it was a full garden, because a garden was something that he would actually pull a little thing behind his horse and it would furrow it, and then they'd rake it out and then they'd plant the seeds. And a garden created a lot of work for my mother, my aunts, my grandma, because when something was ready to be harvest, all the women would get around a red hot stove and a great big copper kettle thing with a lid on it to boil water, to put the jars in to sterilize them so that they could cook the vegetables, whatever they were gonna be, and just put them in the jar and then haul them down underneath the house and put them on some shelves. And that was your food for the winter. That what kept you going. If you didn't have that, you were in bad shape. So everybody had some form or another of a garden if they were physically able to use a shovel and dig in the dirt. They'd plant seeds.
Did you fish?
Fish?
Yeah, did you, when you were
I
a kid?
fished on Lake 14, which is, you probably both know that, but we got Lake 12 and we got Lake 14. They were both named after Section 12 and Section 14, which is also known as Jones Lake. I fished all the time, and I was a good fisherman. And I would cut a limb off, and cut all the limbs off the main piece of it, and then leave one sticking out at the bottom, and then I could put I would walk up past the tavern here where all the retired miners were. I'd have 20 or 30 fish. I'd have perch, I'd have catfish, I'd have sunfish. Anything you had, they'd take, they'd eat. So I gave them all away. I went to the lake, I can't even think of the damn name, the lake, when you go down to Taft's and you go back, Ginder Lake.
Okay.
That's Ginder, and that's Shub Lake. Shub Lake
Yeah.
is back there. And Jim Kanaski and I caught 100 perch. We quit at 100. And we took them home to Mr. and Mrs. Kanaski that lived just down the road by the railroad tracks. And she had us scale 100 perch. I never kept another perch after that. I had scales in my hair when I come home. I never caught it. If I caught a perch again, I turned it loose. I never kept another perch. That's a fact. So yeah, we fished a lot. We would go, we would go to Section 8, which is between the Old Gorge Bridge and Lake 12. And at that time, I lived on Lawson Hill, and I'll tell you about that house later on because it'll be interesting. But we would get out there, and the mine had a strip mine where they worked off the surface, and they had their trucks hauling coal. They would bring them down to the bunkers down here by the dam, where the dam used to be. So Bob Parkins and I would go up there and we'd fish Section 8, catch a lot of trout, and then we'd look where the sun was and we said, better get out of here because we wanted to catch the last trucks going home. Otherwise, you'd had to walk all the way back to the middle of Lawson Hill where we lived at that time because there was no traffic in those days. And so that was interesting.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're going to talk to about some house you lived in.
Yeah, this is interesting. If you were a sophomore and we're going to the Black Diamond High School, and we'll talk about the high school too, you remind me, because that's one thing I get when you're 87, I kind of lose the train of thought. But, so, what were we, I just lost train of thought.
Okay, something about the walls were thin and you drove a nail.
Oh yeah, that was in a house down here. My mother bought a picture, and she was in her front room, and she drove a nail in the front room, and the bedroom was on the other side, through the wall, hung the picture on it, went around to the other side, bent the nail up, and hung a picture on that. 2 pictures on one
The
nail.
walls were that thin, huh?
Yeah, 2 pictures on one nail. Now let's get back to what we were just talking the thing before, because I forgot a piece of that.
Building of the house.
Huh?
Building the house that you're folks
Okay,
lived
yeah,
in.
building a house, here you go. If you were a sophomore in high school, you would start in the 10th grade as a student. And the teacher would take you and the rest of the kids up the middle of Lawson Hill on the right-hand side, and they started building a house. By the time you graduated, 3 years as a junior and a senior, so you put 3 years in there building that same house. It's in the middle of up there. When you go up, all the houses are the same. They're all company houses. Then you got one that sits back a little ways. Don't know what color it is, but that's the house that my mom and dad bought after we moved from the house down here. Bought that one. It's a modern house. It was a 2-bedroom, small. It had a front room, one bathroom, dining room, and a kitchen. And wasn't very big, probably 1,500 square feet. But that took 3 years for the kids to build, in the class of in the school. Yeah.
Okay, here on Black Diamond, when you were a kid, was there a Black Diamond policeman? Or,
There was, his name was Blackie Swan, and he had an old car, and he couldn't catch any of the Dearden boys or the Evanses, the older Evanses, because they had new cars, and they could run away from them. And the jailhouse, I know the undertaker was right behind here originally, because my dad was invited to come in when he was a little kid and see a dead man, and he wasn't dumb enough to go in there, and he saw some guy, and it scared him so bad that he slept between his two brothers for about a month before they kicked him out down here at my grandma and grandpa's house. But he remembered that till the day he died. Walked in there and I said, "What the hell are you looking for? You know, it's a funeral place. Somebody got to be dead if he invited you in there." But he went in anyhow, so that was the way that goes.
okay. There's some, when you were a kid, you'd go to a movie and it might be sword fighting. And,
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, if we went to a pirate movie, everybody had a damn sword the next day, and everybody the day after that had sore knuckles. If there were guns, we'd cut a board and put a handle on it, and then we'd go find an inner tube at the garage that was no good, and then we'd cut it, and then we'd tie it in knots, and then we'd use that rubber to go around the handle in a clothespin, so that you could put your knotted piece of rubber on the end of it and then bring it up and open and stick it in, and the clothespin would hold it there. And then if you pushed on the back of the clothespin, the rubber would be released and you could shoot it at them. So we had rubber gun fights all the time. Every time we had something there, we adjusted to it. We adjusted to it. We worked one summer, we worked all summer to build a metal raft from behind that house down to the creek that comes out of where the dam used to be, and goes into Morganville Creek and then goes into Lake Sawyer. That's the one down in the hole there between Taft's and here. Anyhow, we got the thing going. We had it right where it was going to flood, and when it flooded, we built it out of sheet metal that had been used in roofs, and we didn't compensate for all the nail holes that were in there when we were building it, and it didn't float. So we worked one summer for nothing.
did you know Carl Starrett when you were younger? And
Oh yeah,
what did he do? And just tell
Carl
us
Sire
about
was a
him.
nice man. He was a friend of everybody. His kids were younger than me. He had the garage, and one of my good friends and best friend of my dad was a mechanic for him. His name was Valentine Sternick, known as Teeny Sternick. At one time, this building here was a third of it was a library, the middle was a restaurant, and the back end there was the water district. And his wife was a Darby, a family member, and they were great people, and they had the restaurant here.
Yeah. Oh,
And Pat and Teeny Sternick. And then they owned, no, they were just good customers at Morganville Tavern. They didn't own it. But there were a lot of people like that.
The laundromat?
can you tell us a few? Can you tell us a few of the nicknames of people?
Well, Teeny, Val Sternick, Fuzzy was my brother's name, nickname. There's,
Gooch.
Gomer?
Gooch.
Yeah, but I forget what, Gooch was
Yes.
Gomer. Gooch was Gomer Evans's nickname.
Catfish?
His younger brother Tommy, his nickname was Puddles, because just about the time the recess bell rang, we'd throw somebody on the ground and we'd tickle him. And Tommy, when we tickled him, he would pee his pants. So he had a nickname of Puddles.
What about Catfish?
Catfish was Eddie Banchero.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Eddie Banchero, he had a brother that you see on the bench out here, Angelo, on the table, the outside, one of the family donations. Angelo was injured so bad in the mine accident, and he would have been the oldest child of John Banchero. He died later on down there at the house because of that. His name should be on that wall out there because he was killed by a mine accident, but he's not on the wall, but he should be. And then there was a younger brother of theirs, Ralph and Gomer and several guys I knew that age in about 1944, 45. Those guys were just going into the service because the war wasn't over. It was over in Germany about midway through 1945. But Japan was tough.
Okay. Are you the oldest brother, or in the family?
Oldest what?
Did you live the longest?
Right now, to this day?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My brother probably was 83. Maybe when he died, Bob was right about that time. They were 3 months apart. They both graduated in 1949. I graduated in 53, but I should have been, because of that damn first grade, I should have been graduating in 54, but as much as that ticked me off, I wouldn't have met her, the best thing that ever happened to me, if I'd,
Who's her? Who's her?
my bride,
What's her name?
Susie Thompson.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can never remember her name. But when I ask her, it's always something different.
Oh, yeah. There's $100 sitting out here with the name of Tweety Bird on it. I busted my butt to work, and I lived with my mom and dad. We would leave Black Diamond to go to the public market in Seattle, and then drive back again. And Don Cazaro would drink 6 beers. The sixth one he would open when we were pulling in to him to go in the alley behind where the old St. Barbara church is. And he would take that beer and set it on the table, and then there'd be his dinner about 7 o'clock at night. But he was one of those guys that was in New Guinea, terrible place. He was with the telecommunication division, and he would go up a coconut tree and string a new wire up because the Japanese had cut him. And then he did stuff like that all day long, plus they fought. And he looked back one time, the tree that he had just put a wire in. The Japanese guy was up there cutting it. So that's why he was drinking 6 beers. Those guys saw some really tough stuff over there, and how the hell they ever made it back mentally, I'm really surprised.
Well, Jack, I think our time is up, but I really appreciate you telling your stories, and you're up in the 50s. You know,
All the stories I basically told you are in the 40s.
40s.
53 when I was down in the public market, that might touch it, but the rest of them were all in the 40s.
Okay.
You figure out some, you get some for in the 50s, and we can have a general conversation, or we can have an abridged one. I can tell a lot of stories.
Okay, let's end this for this time.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
A lot of this nobody ever talks about.
that's
You
right.
know?
And there's a lot more stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I knew lots. I knew everybody. I was Chick's kid. That was a key. There was a Boeing field in Seattle. A Boeing bomber took off going towards Seattle, had trouble, and crashed into a meat processing plant, and it killed a bunch of meat people. It was a slaughterhouse. It was a slaughterhouse where they killed animals. And one of the guys got some money out of that settlement later on, and he come over here and he bought the tavern. His name was Stan. He was from Poland. And I used to go in there when I was 15, which was a sophomore, and I'd say, Stan, I need 6 bottles of Rainier. He says, I'll sell them to you, Jackie, but you can't drink them here because you're not old enough. So I would go outside the door after I got that stuff, and 2 bottles went to Jim Kanoski, 2 to me, and 2 to whoever else was with us. And by the time I got home, my mom knew about it, because Mrs. Davis, who was the telephone operator, owned the confectionery over here. You couldn't do a damn thing in this town where you didn't get caught. They all went to the same store, the same bakery.
Did you know Miss Davis?
Yeah.
You know, this is probably not on, but Carl Starrett told me that during the war, when a guy from Black Diamond was being drafted, she would say, call me and I will, and then call back in 15 minutes because I'll run up and get your family, or have a kid go up and get your family down here to the telephone.
Okay.
And she did it a number of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I remember when they first got them where there was 4 party lines. You get 1 ring, you get 2, you get 3, you get 4. If it's my ring and I pick it up, pretty soon I'd hear a click and a click and a click. The other 3 were listening. No secrets.
Okay,
That's great.
Is it-
That's
Do you have
still
enough
going.
time?
That's,
Yeah.
That's
You got
funny.
time?
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Keep going.
How about Labor Day? The different taverns in Black Diamond.
Well, there was Boots's and Morganville and King's and my Uncle Andy's, 4 of them. God, I don't think I forgot one, because I was in all of them.
Which one was your favorite?
First one I was in. They're all
Okay.
good. They're
Okay.
all good.
Let's wrap this up.
Yeah,
Okay.
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
But you keep it open, because we can do this again. I got
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I was just taken back to when I first heard they would want me to do this, because I've been with so many others with Carl Starrett,
Yeah.
and that was way back.
Oh, yeah.
So I said, well, I'm gonna see what about the Second World War on up
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
It was great.
That's
You
good.
did- you
I'm
did a
glad you
good
got
job.
something out of it. Carl was a nice guy. Like I say, Titty worked there. He never had as many cars in front of the place as the guy that's got it now. And the guy that's got it now is a nice guy. But,
Carl said that when he was going to high school, the auto shop was here.
yeah,
And he would go be down there every day for an hour or 2. And when he graduated, the owner of it said, well, look, you're down here all the time, I think I should just hire you. And that was his first job.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
It
can't
was,
remember the new owner's name,
we
but
had
I'll think about
another,
it on the way.
We had another two good brothers that had a garage right down by Boots's Tavern, the Carninos, John and Barney. Barney's what, 103 now?
102, I believe,
102.
close to that.
John died 50 years ago.
Well,
But when I was in school, we had to, of course, ride, after sixth grade, we would ride to Enumclaw, and Barney Carninos was the driver. And then later on, Joe Del Sano was the driver. And both nice guys. Except Barney used to kick me off because my voice was shriller than anybody else's, so he figured it. So then I made a deal with a guy by the name of Yor Davis. He was the son of Mrs. Davis from the store, and he worked in Enumclaw. So I'd just go up and get in his car, and we'd pass the bus, and I'd be at school before Barney got there. But Barney was a great guy, and is a great guy. Yeah.
okay,
But we can go, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about individuals. Carl was a great guy. My Aunt Verna over there, she's right behind you in that picture there. Your head's right against it, right there. Man, woman. Uncle, that's John Thompson and his wife Verna Davis. And up here with the military, that's Fedora Menegini, my Aunt Vi's first husband. He died, but he was in World War I. And
where were your folks buried?
they're in Diamond. I got 13 of them down there.
Are you gonna be buried in Diamond?
No, I'll be on the wall at the Tahoma.
Oh, okay,
My brother's over there.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll both be there. Now the problem I've got is Susie's got claustrophobia, and she don't know if she wants to be in that goddamn wall all the time because she can't get out. That's fact,
Yeah,
right?
I'll be with you, honey, I'll be with you.
All right. Well, that's good.
well, anyways,
Well, I'm happy you did this. I enjoyed doing it. I hope it's something
Well-
for posterity, that people will have an idea
Yeah.
what was going on. Because I'll tell you, it was a different area to be in. I would like one of these days to sit down and talk about my grandfather, who had the livery stable and hauled all of the bricks that were used to build the two-story high school up here in Black Diamond. It's since been torn down. And the ironic thing about it, that was my grandpa Thompson. My grandpa Hill, my mother's father, was taken out of the sixth grade in England and assigned to a trade, a bricklayer. Him and my grandma had my Uncle Al in England. They come across into Canada and started working their way across Canada. My Aunt Doris was born there, somewhere in Canada. My mother was born in Trail, BC, and then they got to Seattle and they had 3 more kids. But he was a bricklayer. He was the head bricklayer to build the school in Black Diamond. So I got one grandpa with his 2 horses dragging all the goddamn bricks up there for the other one to supervise getting built. And then later on in World War II, they had a ladder, a walkway goes up 2 stories, and they had a shed up on top there with a nice peaked roof, and they had pictures of every airplane you could think of that the Japanese had, the Germans had, and the Americans had. And they were wardens. And
Carl Steyer used to put in a shift.
he did what?
During the war, he was assigned a shift, about 4 hours or something.
Yeah,
And,
up on the school.
yeah, and he said, once in a while the guy just comes after him, doesn't show up, so he just went on and took that shift.
Yeah, they're all volunteers.
Yeah,
Yeah. My grandpa Hill from Enumclaw, he was he had about 40 of them worked underneath him. And, yeah, it was interesting, but two of my grandpas could, how they got together, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Didn't your mom stand on top and look for airplanes also?
Yeah, yeah,
That flew over?
yeah, they were spotters. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, I grew up in Ohio, and we used to have blackouts.
Yeah.
And sirens would go. Well, what airplane could reach Ohio in those days?
That's a fact.
Who would
They
want
could
to?
reach here
What is it? What is
when
there?
you're on the coast, but not Ohio.
See, when Joe Darby was a tail gunner, one of them beat 17s or 24s and was going to Plosti from across the Mediterranean, they had no cover with fighter planes because they couldn't fly that far. So they went in low. But in that oil refinery places that they had there, they have, and my grandfather, there's one that he built that's up in Trail, BC. It's about 300 feet tall. And it's probably 10 feet across at the top, but it kind of comes a little bit down. But he'd seen some of his friends hit them goddamn. He said you'd go back for the next flight and half the people were all new, others were gone. Yeah, they'd stay down low, drop the bombs and get the hell out of there. And he got shot, he got a Purple Heart, and his daughter found it for him in a drawer where he put it, and he didn't even know where it was. He didn't even want to see it again. He got shot in the butt. He got a lot of heat from that. Didn't hit any bones. It went cheek to cheek. He's laying on his stomach shooting, and he got hit.
Okay.
Yeah. You can't put a tourniquet on that. Well, listen, we'll let you go.
How soon will we get to see this thing?
I can get it up probably by the end of tomorrow.
Well, I'm in no hurry, but
Oh.
as long as I see it sometime.
Oh yeah, I can make sure.
Interesting. It was a nice.
You did a good job, Don.
Well,
I'm
thank you.
glad.
You did a good
yeah,
job.
I'm sorry.
Zach, you did a good job.
I'm sorry. I blanked out a couple times.
Hey,
That happens.
hey, I know what you're talking about. I have to ask
He
my
doesn't
wife.
blank out very often, I
I
tell
have to
you.
ask my wife so many questions over and over again.
Yeah.
What was his name? Where did they go? Everything. But
Well,
anyways,
I had my son come to see us today, and I slept in a little longer than normal. So I hear footsteps coming up, and it was, hello, and I says, hello, but I told my son the same thing I just told you. I says, your mom walked up the steps, and she said, hello, and I says, hello, and she says, ah, shit.
No, and I didn't do that either.
No.
It's just a story.
But Steve laughed like a son of a gun, so he thought it was funny. That was worth it right there.
okay.
Okay, well, thank you. That was good.
Well, thank you, Zach.
Yeah, no problem.